Okay, good. Can you hear me? That's fine, isn't it? Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Well, you know, I have to say, this is a great privilege for me. I've never been invited to a surgeons conference before. I do plenty of physicians, general practitioners, but never surgeons. So this is the first for me. So thanks for the invitation. And in terms of the Health Service Journal Power List, as you described, a great thing for me. I have to say that the one I really enjoyed was I was 71st most influential man in GQ magazine. So something certainly my sons recognise completely. I've never read the magazine myself. Anyway, it's great to be here at a particularly, I think, significant and important time for the NHS. And before I kind of hopefully give you an insight into what we're up to nationally, or as some people say, what on earth we're up to nationally, I just want to say thank you for the kind of work that you do. It is remarkable if you think about the NHS over the last 7 or 8 years in particular. If you look at any of the measures that you want to use about whether it's outcomes, whether it's access to patients, whether it's confidence of the population, our ability to deliver great healthcare for our people, the NHS has done remarkably well, and you've been at the leading light of that, particularly, I think, in relation to bringing new things into the NHS, new innovative ways of supporting and treating patients, but also a revolution in access to patients to the service as a whole. And particularly over the last 2 or 3 years, I think it's been particularly tough for people working in the NHS. We've had this incredible political furore about what the NHS is all about, what are we trying to do. The government have been absolutely determined to set a series of changes forward. All the controversy around the health bill and the pressure on us generally as an NHS to get better value out of every taxpayer pound that we've got. All of that, I think, brings stress and pressure into the system, and it's remarkable that even though all those things happening, people like yourselves have continued to deliver great services for patients. So thank you very much for all of that. What I want to do in the time I've got with you this morning is first of all take us back to 2004, 2005. And this bit of history, I think, is particularly about the NHS in England. And I know there are people from outside the NHS in England here, but I think the general kind of challenges that I'm going to talk about later are relevant to all developed healthcare systems across the world as we take the service forward. So 2004, 2005. Those of you around will remember it was a time when we had a radical reforming government who were very keen on taking reform in the NHS forward, the development of foundation trusts, payment by results, a whole series of organisational changes called at that time commissioning a patient-led NHS. All of that was happening over here. We had an NHS that started to lose control of the resources that it was responsible for. 2004, 2005, we had a gross deficit in the NHS of £1 billion. And essentially, across the NHS as a whole, we lost the confidence of the people who work within the NHS and many of the people who use it to whether we could actually take the service forward. That was a very difficult time, I think, for the NHS, and it wasn't long ago. And at one point, I remember on one particular weekend, we had over 250,000 people marching in various towns and villages across the NHS about the changes in the NHS. And the thing that struck me about that particular time, and I was part of the national leadership of the NHS at the time. I was working in the Trent region at that time, but I was part of the national group. Is we essentially lost the plot. We lost the point of why we were there. Now that's a slightly extravagant thing to say, but I think nevertheless it was true. We as a leadership of the NHS got so excited about the technical aspects of change, we sort of forgot why we were there. And it seems to me out of all of that, that key point, that obvious point, but a point that you have to keep banging on about wherever you talk to people in the NHS, and particularly in leadership positions like yourself, to focus our attention on the purpose, the improvement of outcomes for our patients within the resources available, the improvement of health of our population. If you focus on purpose, the chances are you'll get to the right place. Now, out of that time, out of that very difficult time for the NHS, you'll remember that we had a change of Prime Minister and the appointment of Aradazi as a minister in the government. Now, the thing about all of that was it focused us much more on the purpose. It got us back to where we should be. It got us back to a place where we could start to think, if we were to design the NHS to improve quality, what would it look like? If quality was the organising principle, how would we do it? Well, the first thing to know is that whilst everyone's in favour of quality, everyone thinks it's something slightly different. And we know that the apocryphal story of, the operation was a great success, but the patient died. All of that sort of thing. You can't have quality unless you have the three things. And that definition of quality as effectiveness, safety, and patient experience is a critical part of what we learnt then. Indeed, in the Health Act that's just been passed by Parliament, that definition of quality as effectiveness, safety, and experience is part of the legislation. So when we talk about quality, we all understand what it means and how we take it forward. One of the things we all know, that when you're kind of driving quality forward in an organisation or in a health system, if you all think it means something slightly different, it's much more difficult to mobilise people to get there. So it's not one of those three things, it's all of them. Now, the other thing about quality, which I guess is obvious, but very important as we went through, is that quality is systemic. It's not about one individual. So it's not about one brilliant surgeon. It's not about one brilliant colorectal surgeon, even. To get the best outcomes for patients for colorectal surgery, you need a population who understand what the signs and symptoms are. You need a population who lives in the right kind of lifestyle and the right kinds of things to do prevention. You need a general practice who understand and can spot the issues as they arise. You need a multidisciplinary team in a hospital. You need diagnostic facilities available early to general practitioners. You need a hospital service which is organised. You need a aftercare service which is organised. To do all of those things, you get great outcomes, not one particular bit of it. And that's an important, I think, lesson for us. It's one that most of the rest of the global economy learned some time ago. But that critical bit about quality being system-wide and outcomes being system-wide is really important. If I think about services like dementia, to get the best outcome for our people with dementia, you need a population that understands and can support people and spot the signs. You need a general practice who can identify the signs, not put people off and say that, well, you are getting old, so you will forget things, won't you? You need services they can refer people to, memory clinics. You need proper services, proper training in our acute hospitals. As you know, in some of our acute hospitals, 40% of the patients in them have some kind of dementia. So how are we training and supporting our staff to help them? How can we get people back into their own homes after they've been in hospital for an acute episode of care? And how do we develop social care, that interface, really important interface with social care? So quality is systemic. And I think we went through a process. We worked, if you remember, through pathways of care. Huge amounts of work has gone on. And you can see, undoubtedly, in your own localities, in the way that you work, you can see these things developing. But as we went through that process with Aradazi, learning and understanding all of that, what became very clear to all of us is that the financial position of the NHS and the financial position of the country was actually deteriorating. And indeed, in 2008, we sat down as the leadership of the NHS and said, look, the kind of growth that we've had over the last few years in some parts of the country, it was up to 10% growth real terms growth every year, was coming to an end. And we're going to go through a time when there'll be little or no growth. Now that's something that the NHS, certainly the NHS in Britain, England, Wales and Ireland, England, Wales and Scotland have never been through in its history. If you look at growth in the NHS, since 1948, we've on average had 4.5% growth, real terms growth, every year. So since 1948. So going through a period, an extended period, perhaps 3, perhaps 4, perhaps 5 years, where no growth at all, was unprecedented. Completely unprecedented in the history of the NHS. And we needed to think in unprecedented ways about how we were going to tackle that particular set of challenges. That's a set of challenges actually that almost all of the healthcare systems across the developed world now are absolutely facing, because we all face that particular issue. How do you continue to improve healthcare? And how do you continue to improve healthcare in the NHS, which is free at the point of use and universally available in a time of constrained resources? And we did what you'd expect. We looked across the world at what were the kinds of things that people needed to do. What kinds of things did we need to do as an NHS to enable us to develop and continue to improve quality and outcomes, but live with this constrained resource? And the first question was it possible? Well, we investigated literally worldwide. We got all the big commentators, the people who write on these kinds of issues, the researchers together, and said, is it possible? They came up with the conclusion that it was possible. But there are certain things that you need to do to enable it to be possible. And I'll talk about those in a little while. But at that time, we invented something which isn't meant to be a program. It's not meant to be a snappy kind of logo or mission or whatever, but we invented something called quality, innovation, productivity and prevention. Not because it was a program, but because we wanted to be able to, for people, when they talked about productivity, they always needed to talk about quality and prevention. And when they talked about quality, they had to talk about prevention and productivity. It was as simple as that. If you talk about one in isolation to the others, you lose the plot. If you talk about one in isolation to the others, you don't deliver the change that you need. So that's why we talked about it in the way that we did. And the key thing in relation to all of this is the word innovation. And by innovation, I don't just mean invention. Generally speaking, in this part of the world, we've been fantastic. You've been fantastic at inventing new ways of doing things, new things to, new ways of improving outcomes for patients. It's not the invention, it's the adoption and the diffusion that we've had the difficulty with. And that, how do you get best practice across the whole system as rapidly as possible? And if you think about in some industries, that cycle is 3 or 4 years. In the NHS, it can be 14 or 15 years. You can see the dilemma that we have. So focusing our attention on how do we make the NHS, how do we get the NHS to do innovation in a way that we've never done it before, I think is a critical part of how we go forward. Now, we've started on that road. This is the second year of the tightening of the financial position across the NHS, and you'll make your own judgments in your localities how people are handling all of that. I mean, it's undoubtedly very difficult. But what happened as we were doing that, beginning that, I think a fundamental thing happened. And it wasn't the development of the Health and Social Care Bill, it was the Chancellor's Autumn Statement, which has now been reproduced in the budget. And that was that the 3 or 4 years that we thought of constrained financial position for the NHS has now turned to 6 or 7 years. So for the foreseeable future, the financial constraints on the NHS are with us. So it's not a blip, what's happening here. It's not a kind of, well, if only we can get over the next 2 or 3 years, something better will come along, and suddenly someone will find some money. If you look at the bleakness of the financial position, the environment we find ourselves in, to be realistic about this, we need to plan on little or no growth for the next 6 or 7 years. So what does that mean? How can we, in that environment, continue to improve outcomes for patients, continue to make the NHS universally available free at the point of use, within the resources that we have. And in a sense, the only question to ask about the Health and Social Care Act, as it is now, is how will that help us do that? It seems to me that's the only question. I'm sure I've got my own views about the Health and Social Care Act, its strengths and weaknesses, all of that. But it is an Act of Parliament, so how can we use that Act of Parliament to help us with that great challenge going forward? And if you think about the productivity challenge and the way we've attacked that particular issue, what we've tried to do is we've tried to attack it in three ways. Firstly, we've tried to tackle those things that only we can do nationally. We think that's going to give us about 30 or 40% of the productivity gains. And that is the kind of the whole issue of pay, the issue of management cost reductions, the reduction of the amount of money that we hold at a national level that we subsequently allocate out to the service. So if we move all of those things forward, we think we can get about a third of what's required out of that. The second big productivity challenge for us is around what you might describe as the basic efficiency, the kinds of things that you all know, the reductions of the length of stay, the increased day case rates, the improvements in procurement, the back office savings in hospital, all of those things that is basic efficiency. It's about how do you run your organisation more effectively and more efficiently. And that's the second bit. And we've got quite a lot of experience and knowledge about how to do that. Sometimes not so well, but we broadly know how to do it. But the third area is the one I think which is going to be the real challenge for us, and the one I think we need to think about how the Social Care Act, Health and Social Care Act helps us to do it. And that is the whole issue of service change. Service change, getting more productive, getting the services configured and organised in a much more effective way, both for patient outcomes and resources. And in a sense, the Chancellor's Autumn Statement makes that more real than it's ever been in the history of the NHS. Now, service change is difficult, undoubtedly. Many of you in this room will have been involved in discussions about it, and by service change here, there's that category that revolves around how can we know that about a third of our patients on any one day, if there were better organised services for in the community, if there were better systems in there, if there was more preventative work, simply don't need to be there. And a substantial proportion could be taken out quicker, out of the hospital quicker, if we have better services outside. So that's the kind of shift from hospital to community. Very important part of the strategy going forward. So how do we do that? And the other one, which I guess particularly, I think, reflects surgical interests across the country and across the world, is the whole issue of concentration, centralisation and specialisation of services generally. So how do we make all of that happen? Because if we don't make it happen, What happens is we have to take the whole of the savings from the efficiency end and continuing the kind of pay restraint that we've got. On the efficiency end, we know what happens if you drive an organisation into the ground in terms of efficiency. Whilst everybody in 2005-06 was getting terribly excited about payment by results and foundation trusts over here, something really bad was happening on Ward 10 at Mid Staffordshire Hospital. We know what happens when a focus on that kind of efficiency, in exclusion of everything else, what dangers it creates for our patients and what dangers it creates for the NHS as a whole. So service change and getting productivity out of that is going to be absolutely critical. So how does the Health and Social Care Act, or how can it help us do that? Well, if we start with the whole issue of commissioning. Now, there's a whole lot of stuff talked about commissioning. It's not a very complicated thing in a sense. Commissioning is the organisation, strategy, delivery of service. It's not planning. It's not something kind of esoteric over here. It's the kinds of things that we need to do to get the services in the right place. And the conclusion we drew over the last few years is that whilst we talked about it a lot, we couldn't actually make it happen in practice. We were struggling to get commissioning in the right place. And one of the things that people said about commissioning, and some of you will remember the world-class commissioning processes, all of that was working at the time, is that the issue was how do we engage clinicians in all of this? Because it's clinicians at the end of the day who will understand the service. It's clinicians at the end of the day who will be able to make the changes, who will have to make the changes to services. And there was a whole range of things that we did, practice-based commissioning, total purchasing, a whole series of things that we did to try and engage clinicians in the commissioning system. And whilst we made some progress, it was only patchy and it was only relatively limited in what it could deliver. So what we're trying to do here is build what might be described as a clinical commissioning system. And we start off with the general practice, the individual practice, and the GP. The practice is important because it is a population. So you're basing your healthcare needs on a population. So general practitioners are not just responsible for people who come through their doors. They're responsible for the totality of the care for their patients. So building on a population is really important. And it was important to make general practitioners at the heart of all of this because of not because we particularly love them or like them, which I'm sure we all do. That's not the reason. It's their unique position in the healthcare system. Primary care overall sees 90% of all contacts with the British public, with the NHS. General practitioners have this unique position in terms of navigating the system. They refer patients, they prescribe things, they connect bits of the system together. And they also, it's all a difficult one to quote, but if every general practitioner referred one less patient a week to the hospital and asked for one less blood test, it would save the NHS £500 million. Now, I say that not because I want them to do it. The important thing about all of that is relatively micro changes in general practice has a massive amplified effect across the NHS as a whole. So if you can connect those things together and build commissioning on it, you've got a real opportunity to give clinicians the opportunity to lead commissioning going forward. So we bring those general practitioners together into clinical commissioning groups. So around the country, I think we're now in a position where everyone now is covered by a clinical commissioning group. So groups of general practitioners have come together. And there is no right size for them. Some are relatively small, some of them are very large. One of them is over 900,000 population, another one is just under 100,000 population. And that's not big. I mean, in a sense, one thing we have learned from commissioning is that there is no right population to be able to commission services from. For some services, it's 10,000, and for some, it's 56 million. And what we need is a system that can come together when it needs to create big populations to commission rarer services and be absolutely micro when it's talking about neighbourhoods and individuals and social care in particular. So bring people together in clinical commissioning groups, but that's not enough because GPs on their own can't do all of that. We need to bring into clinical commissioning groups secondary care clinicians and other professionals, the public, and representatives from social care. So we need to bring together at a clinical commissioning group basis a whole set of people who can help develop and move services forward. But even that's not enough. We all know that to get real change in the NHS, you need to use other mechanisms as well. The most obvious that many of you will be engaged in are the various clinical networks. Networks across the cancer network being the most obvious one, but there are vascular surgery, there are a whole series of clinical networks across the country that have been really powerful at making service change happen. So we need to build them into the system. So we need to connect those networks with the clinical commissioning groups to enable them to make the changes that we all need to make in those services going forward. Particularly, I think, around the concentration and centralisation and specialisation of services. It's been remarkably successful in some areas to enable us to do that. So we need to take that forward. But even that is not enough, because for some things you have to look at the totality of a population, not just about cancer services or vascular services, but how they all fit together. Hence, we're talking here about the development of multi-professional clinical senates at a broad regional 5, 6, 7 million population. Groups of clinicians are coming together to think about how the totality of the pattern of service for that particular region or area might work and feeding into the commissioning of the clinical commissioning groups. In that way, I think you can make the kind of micro changes that you need to make in service at a local level, but can connect together with the clinical community both on a service basis, on a specialty basis, but also on a broader basis through the clinical senate. So bringing that together, I think, has the opportunity to create a clinical commissioning system that can make change happen. But commissioning on its own won't make anything happen. It's people who provide services, the hospitals, it's the community services, it's the social care organisations. They need to be able to respond to all of that. And this, I think, is the bigger challenge for us as we go forward. It's the challenge that you will all know from your own experience working in hospitals across the country. Generally speaking, and I exaggerate to make a point, if you think about most hospitals over the last 5 or 6 years in particular, have had a business model which is essentially the more we do, the more money we get. And whilst we've got some very clever strategies around and very, very, very complicated ways of expressing it, that's essentially what the business model has been over the last period. And that business model is shot. If your hospital, if your organisation is basing itself on expansion, the more we do, the more money we'll get, well, 1 or 2 of you might be successful, but overall, you won't be. Most hospitals have not got to that place. Most hospitals still believe that they'll be the ones that manage to take this forward. Well, their money is simply not there. So hospitals need to think really carefully about the way they organise themselves. Increasingly, they need to think about healthcare as a system rather than running a hospital. Those chief executives of yours who say we run hospitals is not a productive way of going forward in the future. We need to think system. When I talked about quality being systemic, people who run hospitals need to think system-wide to make success in the future. And quite a lot of them are then moving into integrated care. You don't need to manage the whole system to enable you to deliver integrated care. You can do it through partnerships, but however you do it, you need to think, the hospital leaders need to think about how they do that. And the other side of this is the kind of doomsday scenario for hospitals, is that you get energized general practitioners who can make decisions facing a whole set of secondary care clinicians who can't. Who, because of their organisation, because of the way their hospital is organised, they haven't got the delegated responsibilities to make it happen. So the clever people who are running hospitals not only understand how important it is to be a system manager and a system leader, but also how absolutely vital it is for their business to ensure that frontline clinicians have the resources and have the ability to make the decisions to do the service change with the local practitioners, general practitioners, which will be vital as we take the service forward. But even great clinical commissioning and fantastic provision won't do the change that we need. Some of our provision is simply not up to the job. And we all know in the NHS that there are some bits of service that for a whole variety of reasons have not had the managerial focus, the commitment that it needs to take that service forward. Very often niche services or services which just haven't had that kind of focus on it. I was at a place last week and we were looking at children's wheelchairs, a kind of obviously important thing for us to do there. And an interesting thing about that children's wheelchairs, there was a record of a child who had waited 12 years for their wheelchair. Now, what an extraordinary thing. Well, they weren't a child anymore, apart from anything else. An extraordinary thing for us to be in. But those kinds of services, I think there's lots we can learn from the independent and voluntary sector about how to manage those kinds of things. That's why we're talking about any qualified provider. That's why we think it's important to bring innovation and change from outside the existing NHS to enable us to really move those services forward and get great outcomes for those individuals. So provision is a vital part of what we need to do. But provision on its own is not enough. You can have great commissioning, great provision, but the whole issue here is how we bring it together with the local population and patients. And it is critical for the service going forward. One of the things that we know from the research around the world is that if you really want to save resources, particularly around those issues around people with long-term conditions, as we know there's a big expansion coming already here with us about people with long-term and multiple long-term conditions. One of the best ways of doing that is to give responsibility and power to those individuals. The chances are they know more about their health care than anybody else. They live with it all the time. But supporting them, giving them the information, the knowledge, the understanding, the tools, the techniques, to enable them to get hold of, manage their own health care is going to be a critical part of all of that. And we need to engage them in their local populations through the development of relationships with local government and otherwise to encourage and support people through all of that. And we also need, this service change is going to be tough for politicians. But it's very important, I think, for politicians to face this. There's almost a view at the moment that, well, the NHS is getting a very small amount of real terms growth, then therefore everything will be okay. We know because of the demands on us, the increasing expectation of our patients, the ambitions of our clinicians, the demography of the population, all of those things are driving demand in the system. It's just vitally important that we make that service change happen. So that, it seems to me, is the challenge available. Now that service change, the thing I've described there, does not work unless it's clinically led. It just does not work. My experience of doing lots and lots of service change, standing on lots and lots of stages with sceptical members of the public, you need clinical leadership to make that happen. And that's critical. That is so important. And in a sense, that's why we need this conversation. That's why you need to talk to your people in your hospitals. That's why the leadership challenge for people who run hospitals in particular is all about how can we do the equivalent of clinical commissioning groups for secondary care clinicians. The most successful hospitals of the future will be the ones that do that. But overall, finally, if you think about all of that, that's a big challenge to us all, a big leadership challenge, an important thing for us to do. But whilst we do that, we absolutely need to keep our hands on the purpose. It is so easy when you get all of that change happening to lose purpose. Now, there is something that many of you may have heard of, but very few, I guess, will have seen, which is the NHS Constitution, something that the last Labour government developed, which is now being reviewed by the current government. And what the Constitution does, and I would encourage you all to look at it, it sets out what the purpose is, the principles are. And I just want to finish off just by quoting a bit of it. I think it's really important. And it, certainly for me, as the chief executive, as one of the leaders of the system, it's important that I keep this very much in front of what I'm thinking and saying. And it says, the NHS belongs to the people. It is there to improve our health and well-being, supporting us to keep mentally and physically well, to get better when we are ill, and when we cannot fully recover, to stay as well as we can to the end of our lives. It works at the limits of science, bringing the highest levels of human knowledge and skill to save lives and improve health. It touches our lives at times of basic human need, when care and compassion are what matters most. It seems to me that's a fantastic purpose for an NHS. It's why, in a sense, there's been so much furore about the NHS across the newspapers and in the public amongst politicians. We all care about this. That challenge of how do we deliver improvements to our services universally available to all our patients, free at the point of use, but within the resources available, is absolutely critical to making this happen. I think it's really important that all leaders in the system, managerial and clinical, raise to that challenge. It is extraordinarily difficult. This will be extraordinarily difficult to do. No one has ever done it quite in this way before. But in a sense, that's why it is so important. Our patients and our communities depend on us. Thank you.